Hello and welcome to WION, broadcasting live from London. I'm Katie Bilbeam and these are your headlines.
We are still following the tremors and the results of the earthquake in this city. It's not only about the buildings that fell, it's also about the buildings that might fall.
The death toll in the Turkey Syria earthquake crosses 34,000. The UN admits failures in shipping desperately needed aid to Syria. The World Health Organization officials warn of growing risk of infectious diseases. WION reports from Ground Zero in Syria's Aleppo, the only global channel on the ground there. Quake havoc adds to horrors in the war-ravaged country.
We are still...
Asia's biggest aero show begins in India. Prime Minister Modi says India wants to more than triple annual defence exports to $5 billion by 2024 to 25. The UK expects to deepen ties with India in the defence sector, says the British High Commissioner to India, Alex Ellis, at the Aero India 2023. He says defence is a key element to broadening the UK-India partnership.
Speaker, my honourable friend is a great advocate for his constituents.
Artificial intelligence chatbots can give convincing but fictitious answers, warns Google search engine boss as the race for AI dominance heats up. It's 1 week today since the devastating earthquake battered Syria and Turkey. The death toll has crossed 34,000 as hopes fade for survivors in the rubble. Well, the focus shifts to a range of other issues: rehabilitation for the homeless, healthcare and infrastructure, and warnings of disease. Moreover, Turkish authorities have begun legal action over collapsing buildings. Looting and crime due to collapsed supply chains is an added concern now. Illegal business deals between builders and the government has taken the catastrophe to an immeasurable scale. Some architects are viewing the destruction of buildings as Turkey's inability to maintain basic building standards. Turkish officials have responded to the outage by announcing a rapid series of investigations and arrests linked to the construction. Well, according to reports, Turkish Justice Ministry has issued warnings for 114 more people and launched 134 investigations. Meanwhile, rescuers from all over the world are trying to pull out survivors from the rubble as chances of finding more survivors growing more remote. Well, late on Sunday, a woman and a child were pulled alive from the wreckage of the deadly earthquake by El Salvador's rescue team. In Haiti, rescuers pulled out a father and a daughter from under the rubble of the earthquake.
Geçmiş olsun bakayım.
Evet, gel. Bırakma. Ben diyene kadar bırakma. Bravo! İçeride daha kimse var mı?
Var tabii.
Meanwhile, in Aleppo, a soup kitchen prepares some 6,000 meals on a daily basis. The meals are sent to 174 shelters that have popped up across Aleppo in order to feed the hundreds of earthquake victims staying there.
With regards to food, God willing, the efforts that have been placed will cover the needs. But there is still a shortage of non-food items, mainly mattresses and blankets. There is a real shortage of that in Aleppo because it's been dealing with a crisis for a long time. And there was no distribution of such items. Hopefully, all of these things will be brought to them. But the biggest problem, of course, is housing. And what we are doing in our organization is that we are working on securing housing for 6 months to a year for all those impacted.
The earthquakes have left residents with no water, electricity or shelter. In Syria's quake-hit Aleppo, victims narrated their ordeal after suffering from the quake. WION's Gadi Francis reports from Ground Zero.
These people are all survivors from this area. Right now I am in Salhin, one of the worst hit areas of the city of Aleppo. They're telling me they were able to survive because as the buildings were shaking, they evacuated very quickly. But unfortunately, in this area, people did not make it and did not survive. كم عدد الضحايا هون؟ 8 أشخاص. 8 people died here. وقديه قدرتوا تنتشلوا ناس؟
انقاذ يعني؟ انقاذ 87. 4 أشخاص لحقناهم.
4 people from this building were able to be rescued, but 8 other people died here. I'm being told by all the survivors from this area that they weren't able to help. فيك تخبرني مين اجى عمل الريسكيو؟ مين ساعدكم اول شيء بانتشال الناس؟ شو صار معكم؟
بس اهل الحي.
اونلي.
اهل الحي.
وثاني يوم؟
ثاني يوم اجت الحكومه كسرت واجت الانقاذ.
اوكي.
بالدفاع المدني السوري.
بالدفاع المدني وبالانقاذ قدرتوا تنقذوا حدا كمان من تحت الانقاض؟
طلعنا هذول 5 اشخاص طلعناهم.
مش انتم الدوله يعني؟
الدوله السوريه.
اشلاء جثث يعني؟
ايه اشلاء طلعناهم شقف.
4 نسوان.
اوكي
بنات عمي يعني ان ما غرب. ما غرب.
الله يرحمهم.
الله يسلمك يا رب.
في غير هون دمار كمان. هلا حدا قال لكم
تأذي وهنيك وهون يعني تأذي.
As you can see in the camera, carpets, very small details of people's homes have just turned into rubble. I'm being told by the survivors that in the first few hours it was only them. And then after a few hours, the Syrian government and the Syrian army forces came and started helping them, and they were able to rescue some and to pull out the bodies of the rest dead relatives.
Well, the situation is more grave in Syria, which has already been ravaged by a decade-long civil war. People in Syria are now fighting to survive following the aftermath of the natural disaster. The United Nations calls it a crisis within a crisis. WION's Gadi Francis reports from the Bassenzera area of Aleppo in Syria.
Residents of this building are evacuating their things, their home, collecting their memories and their lives to flee from this building that is in danger of falling any second. We are still following the tremors and the results of the earthquake in this city. It's not only about the buildings that fell, it's also about the buildings that might fall later on because of the shock of the earthquake. As you can see, the families are gathering all the goods from kitchenware to their clothes, tables, all their lives, and fleeing, heading to become once again displaced. The thing is, many of the people of this city have been already displaced and came back during the war. After the war, after the end of the war, after ISIS was expelled from these areas, once again the earthquake destructed their homes. This building was destructed because it was in danger of falling after the earthquake. The whole street is actually endangered, and now the government authorities and the army are trying to evacuate more and more, and they will bring down more of these buildings. Now it is memories of people, families. I can just see here a purse, maybe some toys for kids. Years and years, lives of families have been totally destructed. All these buildings have been evacuated, and all of them are in danger of falling any minute. I'm here from Bustan al-Zahra, Aleppo. We will check out more of that as we continue our tour.
The UK's labour market has accused the ruling Conservatives of lavish spending using taxpayer-funded debit cards. Well, the Keir Starmer-led Labour Party is set to launch a social media campaign on this. The campaign will aim to highlight five-star hotel visits by some senior Tory leaders. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the new Tory chairman, Greg Hands, have come under their radar. Well, according to the Labour Party, the amount spent is somewhere near £145 million. Labour says in 2021, Sunak stayed at a five-star hotel where the spendings were more than £4,500 on accommodation for Sunak and his aides. UK's main opposition party further added that Rishi Sunak's treasury spent around £33,000 on 13 fine art photographs and more than £100,000 on communication workshops from the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. Well, Labour described the spending as a scandalous catalogue of waste. Labour leaders say this comes as the UK is facing the worst cost of living crisis for decades, and the PM Sunak has failed to keep a watch on lavish spendings in his government. However, senior Tory source said that information about the use of government procurement cards, or GPCs, is already in the public domain. One Conservative leader even pointed out the cards were introduced by a Labour government in 1997, and it was only made transparent by a Tory-led government in 2011. As the war in Ukraine rages, the role of weapons being sent in for military action becomes more crucial. The Ukrainian president recently made a surprise European visit where he pleaded with European leaders for jets and more modern weaponry for Ukraine. On the other side, reports have surfaced about Iran smuggling in drones for Russia. Well, according to the UK-based publication The Guardian, Iran used boats and a state-owned airline to transfer new variations of advanced long-range armed drones to Russia. According to the report, at least 18 of the drones were delivered to the Russian Navy after Russian officers made a visit to Tehran in November. The report states Russians selected 6 Mohajer 6 drones, as well as the Shahed-12, Shahed-191 and 129 drones. Well, both of these drones have an air-to-ground strike capability and can cover a distance of around 200 kilometers. Well, this latest information underscores close ties between Tehran and Moscow. Earlier, the US said Iran had begun showcasing the Shahed-191 and 129 drones to Russia, and they expected Tehran to sell them to Moscow. Russia has used Iranian-made drones to carry out attacks across Ukraine. Earlier reports were published suggesting that Iran's supply of drones to Russia appears to have escalated. This after a study found Tehran has modified its drones to cause maximum damage. Protests gripped the Spanish capital, Madrid, where hundreds of thousands of protesters demonstrated against the poor upkeep of public healthcare system by the regional government. An estimated 250,000 people protested in support of the ailing public health system, which is suffering shortages of staff and equipment. All protesters, they thronged the Plaza Civils area in the city centre, where they chanted slogans and waved flags. They allege that the Conservative regional government is destroying this system. Protesters say that the government is dismantling public health services and favouring private health providers.
Syria está en el botánico. porque están intentando desmantelar la sanidad pública. Sobre todo han cerrado urgencias, están intentando cerrar primaria y sobrecargar los hospitales, solo por eso.
Bueno, pues cada vez estamos peor, tenemos menos recursos, menos personal y creemos que lo que se está haciendo todo es en favor de la sanidad privada, para negocio. Entonces creo que hay que luchar contra ello y pelear a muerte por la sanidad pública porque es lo que nos hace iguales a todos.
Among the protesters were primary caregivers. The primary care system in the Madrid area is under pressure because of resource crunch. As a result, people have no choice but to turn to hospital emergency departments, which have been overwhelmed with patients.
Hay 1 millón de madrileños sin médico, entre ellos 200.000 niños sin pediatra. Han destrozado las urgencias extrahospitalarias y la equidad en la atención en las zonas rurales. Cada vez son mayores las dificultades para poder garantizar una atención digna y de calidad.
The Madrid government has been criticised by the public health workers for the past few years now. Well, the criticism rose further during the COVID-19 pandemic over poor staffing in hospitals and primary health centres. However, the government has denied extending any favours to the private health sector. Regional governments in Spain are responsible for a large part of the health budgets. There is now an increase in competition to tap into the AI market after the release of the ChatGPT. Recently, Alphabet's Google also came up with its own Bard to compete neck and neck with ChatGPT. However, concerns about the authenticity and accuracy of its answers has raised some questions. Well, Google search chief has now warned about the fictitious nature of such answers produced. Google search engine boss said AI chat boxes can give convincing but fictitious answers. Raghaven said this type of artificial technology is what leads to a creation of hallucinations against the solid boundary of legitimate-looking facts and arguments. Well, due to leading inaccuracies in the searches, the shares of Google plunged by as much as $100 billion last week. Recently, Google used a presentation to unveil its AI chatbot called Bard that it hopes will rival ChatGPT. However, an ad for Bard showed it giving an inaccurate answer to a question about the James Webb Space Telescope. Well, Raghaven was also quoted saying that Google felt the urgency to release Bard to the public, but it is also felt there is a great responsibility not to mislead the public. Raghaven's comments came after some criticised Google and Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai for the rushed and botched launch of Bard. Google has been on the back foot after OpenAI, a startup Microsoft is backing with around $10 billion in November, introduced ChatGPT, which has since wowed users with its strikingly human-like responses to user queries. Alphabet, which is still conducting other testing on Bard, has not yet indicated when the app will go public. India is touching new heights. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi made this remark when he inaugurated one of the largest defence aerospace exhibitions in the world. Well, the annual event, known as Aero India, is taking place at the Indian Air Force Station in Bangalore. The show began with a flypast, which culminated into a tristful formation in the sky by the Indian Air Force. After this, the Prime Minister, the Defence Minister and the state's Chief Minister addressed participants. Well, during his speech, Modi highlighted India's ambition of exporting defence equipment worth $1 billion by next year. $5 billion, even I should say, by next year. He also highlighted India's journey from being a defence importer to becoming a major exporter.
जो देश दशकों से सबसे बड़ा डिफेंस इंपोर्टर था, वो अब दुनिया के 75 देशों को डिफेंस इक्विपमेंट एक्सपोर्ट कर रहा है. हमारा लक्ष्य है कि 2024-25 तक हम एक्सपोर्ट के इस आंकड़े को 1.5 बिलियन से बढ़ाकर $5 बिलियन तक ले जाएंगे.
The 5-day event is aimed at building new technology for the Indian aviation industry. This is the 14th edition of the show, and more than 800 companies are exhibiting at the event. Several made in India aircraft are on display, showcasing India's growing stature as a defence aerospace power. Some of these aircraft and other defence equipment are already being exported to friendly foreign nations. But India likes to take such exports further in volume. Additionally, the Indian Defence Minister will be hosting the Defence Ministers' Conclave. Defence ministers from 32 nations will take part in this meeting while talking specifically about the Air Force chiefs. All 30 nations are expected to send their senior Air Force officials. This will help to boost potential exchange of ideas, best practice, and increased understanding at the force leadership level.
Of Suryakiran aerobatic team.
I'm Katie Pilgrim here in London. Stay with WION for more international news coming up just next.
There are many other